Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and tell me in the comments section where you're watching this video from today, this Saturday. Chris Boyd has been at it again. Mr. Meltdown, yes, has been having a dig at Brendan Rodgers and Celtic once again. He has slammed Brendan Rodgers. He's questioned why the former Liverpool and Leicester boss returned to Celtic. He pointed out that Celtic are maybe worse off compared to this time last season. And in terms of both points and goals scored, Celtic do remain top of the league as it happens this weekend into Scottish Cup weekend. But Boyd feels that Celtic are just papering over the cracks. How do you feel about that? Is Boyd correct? Are Celtic just papering over the cracks? And we're going to talk about this a bit more, so make sure you stick around to the end of the video. We're going to talk about Peter Lawwell and co. Boyd feels that we're just he wasn't expecting the same type of manager that came to Celtic in 2016 and 2017. He didn't expect that type of football. He said, but punters are seeing a very different Celtic manager. It says Wednesday's woeful display against Hibs, and it was a bad display. Let's not. He's not really lying, but I mean, all he does. I mean, he's so blue tinted with his reviews of things, isn't he? But and he does like a bit of a meltdown. He said on Sky, he's like, it was robbery. It was robbery against Aberdeen. It was robbery, pure robbery, man. Pure robbery. Wait a minute, I'll go and take a wee snifter. It was pure robbery. They're 9 points and 21 goals worse off than they were after 25 Premier games last season, which is an interesting point. We're 9 points and 21 goals worse off. I knew that we hadn't been scoring as many goals, and we have dropped. The two games that we lost in December, if we'd won those games, it's in the past, you can't say that. But if we'd won those games, we wouldn't be talking about it as much because we'd still be away in front of them. The fact that we have dropped points, the former Rangers man has been left puzzled. It says at the beginning of the season, it says Rodgers' return raised many eyebrows, but he's been left puzzled as why the board wanted to convince Brendan Rodgers' return. He says when Ange Postecoglou first left for Tottenham, he made it clear, Brendan, that he wasn't interested in returning to football, remember, and Brendan wanted to take a year out of football after his exploits of the way that he was removed from his last position. What vision did... And I've got... There's sometimes like Boyd goes into a fantastic meltdown, but I think he's been maybe listening to a lot of Celtic fans. He wants to know exactly what Dermot Desmond said to Brendan Rodgers to get him back to the club. Because if he says, I don't know what it was, but he says watching Rodgers Celtic this season is like giving a couple of failed marriage one last go. He never wrote that. He's not that clever enough to write that. But it was an interesting comment that he's made. I mean, what exactly did Dermot say to Brendan to get him back? Because I think what Dermot said on one hand, the board are saying completely a different thing on the other hand. It's just bizarre what's went on at this season. Win or lose the title, it seems inevitable that the reunion won't last long, says Chris Boyd. And a lot of people, a lot of Celtic fans think that Brendan Rodgers won't see out his 3-year contract. I think he will see out his 3-year contract. I think he won't walk out on Celtic again. He won't leave. I think that the manager has a point to prove. He has a point to prove to the Celtic supporters that he is one of them and he wants to do the best for the club. I think if it does go tits up, as they say, it will be down to the board not backing him and the board then deciding to remove Brendan Rodgers. And I think at that point, Brendan Rodgers is going to come out and tell a story, or he's going to write a book about it. Definitely. I think he'll write a book about it and about the troubles of Celtic. Tell me what you think. Brendan Rodgers, he went on to say, he says, I remember the Ronnie Roar at Easter Road on Wednesday. He says, when I look at the Ronnie Roar of Brendan Rodgers, it was relief etched all over his face. I'm struggling to remember seeing him like that during his career as boss. He's never been so ecstatic at a win. And he goes on to say, the Celtic punters have been directing their anger at the boardroom instead of the dugout. But we're on the verge. Are the fans on the verge of turning on Brendan Rodgers? Tell me what you think about that in the comments. Are the fans on the verge of turning against Brendan Rodgers? Because let's face it, when Peter Lawwell walked back into the building just over a year ago, a year and a month ago, um, no one would have expected things to have went the way that they have went over the last calendar year. To lose the top manager as Ange Postecoglou, to have a fantastic team. They're playing fast attacking football. But then again, when you look towards the end of the last season, look, teams were starting to sit in this low block. But when the manager came in, we all knew, and we are repeating ourselves a bit, but we all knew we need four good players to make the first team better. First team ready players. We didn't bring in four first team ready players. We brought in 8 prospects. The January window was poor. Brendan Rodgers said about the January window that Celtic could have been a bit more. That was the word they used. Brave, wasn't it? It could have been a bit more brave in the window, alluding to the fact that he wanted to go and buy players, and the Celtic board said, "No, we're not going to spend that money." Reading between the lines, that's what it comes across to me. Tell me what you think. I think it's definitely when Brendan Rodgers come out and says that we could have been a bit more brave. That to me says that it is definitely still a massive split between Brendan Rodgers and Peter Lawwell. Is Peter Lawwell still pulling the strings? If Peter Lawwell is pulling the strings, what is Nicholson doing in a job? What is Nicholson doing in a job? The Celtic fans will not forgive Brendan. Well, they will not forgive the board. I think if we were to lose the league and the cup this season, if we were to win nothing, I think the Celtic fans will, to a man, not be happy with the PLC. Will they aim things at Brendan Rodgers? He is the top class manager, but has Brendan Rodgers been given the job with one set of promising words to the reality? I mean, it's been like it's like going for a job interview and told, put it on working man's our terms. You went for a job and you were told you're going to get, you get every Saturday overtime. Get every Saturday overtime and it'll be double time. And then the reality is you get put down to a 4-day week. That's what it's like. You know, trying to put it on our working man's terms is basically that. Has Brendan Rodgers had one hand tied behind his back doing the job this time? I mean, like, people are going to say, look, he spent a lot of money. But when you're not buying in the players that you want, and the recruitment team and the PLC are saying, no, we need to go with these players because this is the business model. And even Brendan Rodgers said that after the last transfer window. He said, look, I now fully understand the business model here now at Celtic. It's obviously a lot different from what it was before. It's obviously a lot different. The fact that Celtic now seem to think that they can go out and buy £2 and £3 million players and then turn them into £25 million players. Ange Postecoglou said it. He said, what's the difference between taking a £2 or £3 million player, turning them into a £10 million player, to buying a £15 million player and turning them into a £30 million player? It's all about perspective, and I think the Celtic board do have a lot to answer to. It's not the day to talk about that, though. It is all about the Scottish Cup this weekend. Give me your predictions for the Scottish Cup against St Mirren tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting game. Celtic have struggled at St Mirren this season. And all eyes will be on Brendan Rodgers and his team selection, with the one and only Alistair Johnston out for the foreseeable future with a fracture to his head. It is ominous that he will play again between now and the end of the season. If he's out for 2 months, he's then got to get back on the training pitch, and then he's got to get back up to speed. It's a sore one for Celtic. Have Celtic been unlucky this season? Brendan Rodgers has said that, look, he opened up about the increased difficulty of clinching the Scottish Premier title, and he says, look, when the first time I came here, we were unbeaten. And that's something that I don't think will ever be achieved again in Scottish football. Do you think? And it won't, because Celtic PLC won't let that happen. And Brendan Rodgers could have came in and could have said, look, I want to buy X, Y, and Z players at this, and it would walk the league. If it was, when you look at a comparison between the Celtic PLC just now and, say, the old Rangers team when they were on their road to 9 in a row back in the 90s, if they were in the position that we were in, they would have went out and bought Mavovsky and Shankland. It's as simple as that. They would have bought both players to basically make sure that they bought the league, that they had the league wrapped up. They would have done that back then. And anyone that says they wouldn't have is an absolute liar. They would have done that back then, and Celtic boards held back in my opinion, and the Celtic board need to answer the questions. It's no use asking questions to Brendan Rodgers because he's just getting told what to say. He's just got to firefight. He's in the trenches trying to firefight this on a weekly basis, whilst the men that make the decisions, sit in their little ivory office in Celtic Park. It's probably not even ivory, is it? It's just a normal office. But they do sit. Is it time? Is it time that Nicholson and Co came forward and answered some questions about the final? Well, we'll get that in a couple of weeks' time because the half-term results will come out. And when the half-term results come out, it'll tell us that Celtic are sitting with even more money in the bank, and that might not go down too well with a lot of the Celtic fans, considering we could have spent some of that money this season to maybe just give the manager a bit more oomph and firepower and belief in the squads. And on that note, have a fantastic day, Celtic fans all around the world.